Hi, it's Global Politics with Jim Martin. Today, I wanted to talk about the assassination of Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov and his aide in Moscow in a bombing attack. Apparently, someone placed one of those electric scooters outside of his apartment, which was in Moscow proper, about, 2.5 miles from the Kremlin, and remotely detonated that, probably from across the street. There's been some video put out that suggested that somebody was filming that or live streaming it. Who was he? Is this as dramatic as it seems? And how is Russia likely to respond? General Kirillov was the head of the chemical, biological, and nuclear defense troops for Russia. He was born in 1970 and entered the army as soon as he could. And it seems as if he spent a majority of his career with those units. This is somewhat unusual in that sometimes you see a lot more politics involved in these promotions. This guy actually had some expertise with NBC style warfare. Recently, he's been sanctioned by the United Kingdom for the use of choking agents against Ukrainian forces. They've used this many times. Choking agents are tear gas on steroids. Under most conditions, if you get hit with tear gas, it'll burn your eyes, you'll have a lot of snot, all these sorts of things, but it won't leave any kind of lasting problems for you. Whereas these particular agents are much stronger than that and can cause real long-term damage to your throat and lungs. A lot of Ukrainian troops have had to deal with these kinds of attacks. He's also been a very public figure voicing support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine and has spun a lot of wild tales in some press conferences, spreading a lot of disinformation. He's the one who created this narrative about how the United States was secretly building a network of biological weapons factories in Ukraine. Absolutely baseless allegations. So he's been very active through press conferences and social media to spread disinformation that supports the Russian position in Ukraine. This attack is thought to be the closest to the Kremlin and thus garnered a lot of headlines. It is a dramatic act. It did catch a lot of people off guard. However, it's not really unprecedented. Ukraine's secret services have proven remarkably adept at doing this sort of thing and have killed about 10 Russian generals over the course of the war, both in the combat zones or also outside of Ukraine. People have also been killed or died under circumstances which might lead folks to believe that Ukraine was involved, but they've made no claim of responsibility. In this case, they have made such a claim. That said, it's also possible that this was some sort of score-settling political assassination purely due to internal Russian politics. That is always a possibility. That said, it's probably much more likely that the Ukrainians did this. This does expose a vulnerability for Russia and its security forces, particularly the FSB. Kirillov's prominent position and the location of the attack suggests that Ukraine must have a network of agents within even Moscow itself. There was an assassination of someone, I think a military blogger in St. Petersburg a while back, but this is Moscow. So this is a totally different ballgame. These kinds of operations, if you've ever read about them, are painstakingly slow. They develop information and predictions about where people will be over particular spans of time. I think it's pretty obvious that this guy did not have the greatest information security, nor did he think about switching up his route very often. He probably had a routine when he was in Moscow. They knew he was there and took this moment to strike. What this does is it throws all of those counterintelligence security people into really a fit because they have to question whether or not any of the preparations that they've made for any senior figure are effective, and whether or not their own services have been penetrated in some way. That's a massive reassessment process, and they have to do that. That kind of task takes time, effort, and resources that frankly they can't afford to spare while being in a major war. Today I learned that Russia apparently detained an Uzbek national who claims that he was working under the auspices of the Ukrainians. Looks like they beat him up some. He could have done this. It's also quite possible that they just happened to pick somebody up or pluck this guy out of jail and forced him to confess to this. In authoritarian regimes, you can never be wrong. You must always appear strong. The speedy arrest of an individual and his on-camera confession is just what the doctor ordered for Russian propaganda to make it seem like they've got this all contained. Whoever actually conducted this operation is either high-footing it back to Ukraine or just went to ground again to bide their time and wait for another operational opportunity within that Moscow sphere. How is Russia likely to respond to this? In much the same way that it has to other sorts of attacks like this, the drone attacks into Russia and so forth and so on, is to lob a bunch of missiles and drones at Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and the power grid. That's kind of their jam at this moment, is to make these public, often frankly devastating reprisal attacks, which do real damage to Ukrainian infrastructure and kill a lot of people too. As far as something more dramatic than that, I would say it's unlikely. The FSB and their response is likely to be much more opaque. Operational security and the protection of sources and methods and all these things are just as important to the FSB as they are to Ukraine and any other intelligence service in the world. If they were to have a reprisal against some sort of senior Ukrainian figure, you certainly wouldn't hear them talking about it beforehand. They'll probably build their cases, look for opportunities, and take them when they can. It's unknown how often the FSB has been active operationally within Ukraine itself, or any possible assassinations that they may have carried out. Ukraine is quite close-mouthed about its losses in that way. Really hard to tell, but FSB, like any major intelligence services, keeps score and takes opportunities when it can. This is a developing story, and much could come out in the next week that changes this narrative, but that's where we stand today. That's what we know. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like and subscribe. Comments are welcome too. And I look forward to seeing you the next time around. Have a great day. Thank you.